Thank you, Chairman. This is a significant piece of legislation, not least because it is the only commitment in the programme for government that will seek to close down 3 Irish businesses, but it is the first instance in which a legitimate and lawful farming practice will be prohibited in the state. One could be concerned that this is setting a dangerous precedent for other legitimate and lawful traditionally farming practices, purely based on the ideological views of a select cohort. I understand that the discussions between the Department of Agriculture and the 3 farmers concerned have not been progressing much, to the farmers' disappointment. The 3 farmers have sought to meet with the Department in recent weeks and have written to the Minister's office directly on the 17th of November expressing their outstanding concerns, but received no response. Minister McConnell reiterated in the Dáil on the 4th of November his intention to provide for a fair and reasonable scheme of compensation for these 3 farmers concerned. However, no one of a sound mind would consider what is being proposed to them in the closing down of their business is a fair or reasonable. These amendments put forward today were also sent to the Minister's office directly by the farmers, but went unanswered. This is neither fair nor reasonable treatment of any farmer. As discussed by the committee during pre-legislative scrutiny phase of the bill in July this year, the basis of which the Department is proposing to calculate the compensation entitled to the farmers, their earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and is currently using the worst 5 years in the farmers' industry as the period. This would give the farmers pittance in compensation. Farmers have asked that a fairer reference period be used, a longer period that fairly and accurately reflects the cyclical nature of their trade. The farmers have provided the necessary financial information to the Department that illustrates this. Why is the Department opposed to considering this, when it is clear that the fur trade operators in a cyclical nature of an average of 7 to 10 years? Concerns were raised by the committee members around staff only being entitled to statutory redundancy, and both the Minister and his officials committed to reconsidering this. These concerns seem to have been ignored by the Department officials, have reaffirmed that staff will only be entitled to the bare minimum statutory redundancy. It is completely unacceptable that these workers should be punished through no fault of their own, and because they now find themselves unemployed at the hands of the government. Will the Minister once and for all consider giving these workers a redundancy package that is fair and reflective of their services? The farmers concerned have been left in limbo while the Department dragged their heels, and while there remains huge disparities in agreeing the terms of phasing out of the practice of fur farming with regard to that constitutes fair and reasonable compensations for those involved. And I suppose, look, the amendment is really in relation to workers will be needed for the winding down process of each farm, and we feel that that should be added into that as an amendment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chairperson. And listen, thanks to yourself and again all of the committee members for the opportunity to have this dealt with in committee stage today. And thanks also to your committee members for the opportunity in the Dáil as well today to add the piece in relation to the forestry changes to this bill as well, which I think was a sensible and reasonable and practical approach as well to furthering that measure. Obviously, where we're coming from here is that it's a significant change. There's 3-4 farmers left in the country, all of which have been operating in line with the laws and regulations and the practices that are required of them, and obviously which, whenever the industries would have started out, were encouraged and given state encouragement at that time indeed to start off these enterprises. So that's something that I'm very cognizant of and very aware of. But times have changed, and the social acceptability of fur farming as a practice has changed, and indeed the social acceptability of the use of fur in clothing is very much a changed vista as well. As a result of that, and the decision made by the state that it wasn't appropriate to farm these what would be naturally wild animals for the fur anymore, and to make it illegal, it is important that we treat the remaining 3 farmers with respect and with fairness, in recognition of the fact that their livelihood is being impacted. And that's why in this legislation today, and which we have discussed previously at earlier stages, we are seeking to ensure a fair approach is taken in terms of compensation for those farmers and indeed as well for their workers. So I know, speaking specifically to Deputy Collins's amendment, so in Section 7, first of all, a redundant worker is defined in the bill as it stands as an employee who is dismissed during the period commencing 6 months before the commencement of the bill and ending 6 months after the date of commencement of the Act. This provision applies to certain parameters, limits to the group of workers that will be eligible when compensation has been calculated. So obviously, the Act hasn't been enacted by the Oireachtas yet. We're at the first stage of that in terms of bringing it through the Houses of the Dáil, or through the Dáil, and then it will also obviously have to go through the Seanad. Once it is through both Houses of the Oireachtas, then it will be open to myself as Minister to actually commence the Act. And from that point where I commence it, there will be a period of 6 months before and 6 months after the commencement of the Act, within which workers will be eligible for redundancy payment as part of the compensation package to the employers, to the farmers, to provide for their workers through that. And I think the fact that it will be 6 months before and 6 months after very much reflects the fact that there is a seasonality aspect to mink farming. It does cover a full calendar year, as in 6 months before and 6 months after. So I think that's proportionate and appropriate, and I think it covers that seasonality aspect, and I think it is the right approach here. Obviously, if you were to say 12 months, then that would mean you would have as such a two-year window. And somebody that, for example, who was made redundant 12 months before the commencement of the Act would become eligible for redundancy, even though the farming was able to be continued during that period and there was no requirement on the farmer to actually stop. So listen, I think we have to be fair, first and foremost, to the farmers concerned, but we also have to be sensible and proportionate in relation to what we put in the Act here. And I think we're being more than proportionate in relation to actually reflecting a 12-month full calendar year window to reflect the fact that we capture any seasonality associated with the close down. Thanks, Chairperson.